Welcome to 5 Minutes in the Word, a daily devotional in the Word of God.
Derek, you look at the book of First Corinthians, and I guess in some ways I'd say, well, if there ever was a church that makes us feel better about our weaknesses, this is it.
This is it. That's right.
These guys struggle with a lot of things, and we do too. And I'm not saying that we ought to be put at ease because of it, but we feel like, well, if there was hope for them, there may be hope for us too. Paul, in the opening two chapters for sure, has been talking about basically how they're following men, that they're not realizing that the real strength and the real force of Christianity is in listening to the gospel. That's where the power is. He gets to the beginning of chapter 3 and he's right back on it with, hey, why don't you all grow up, you know? And as he does that, he begins to explain that, you know, you're following men, but the reality is that as long as you follow men, you're fleshly, you're worldly.
Right.
So what does he do then?
Well, you know, for one thing, I just want to say this. He's talking about here, and he uses two men as great examples. He uses Paul and Apollos.
Right.
Now, these are two, great men of faith.
Right.
Two great preachers. Apollos seems to be very eloquent in speech, but here's Paul, full of passion, full of energy. He's ready to declare the word. So intelligent, both of them in their own ways. But you can kind of see how in our world it would be easy to follow somebody like that. Someone that's full of energy, someone that's powerful, someone that's really eloquent and good in speech. It would be easy to follow those kind of people. But no matter if you're the first century, like the church here in Corinth,
right,
or no matter if you're the church of today, we can't follow them in. That can't be our primary focus. And that's what he's trying to instruct them here. So that means that people don't need to follow after you, Mr.
Right.
Garrett. They don't need to follow after me as Derek or Logan or any of us here. Then they need to follow after the Word of God. And that's the important thing. And so there, as you said, that there in verse 4, he says, "For when one says, I am of Apollos, and the other I am of Paul, and the other I am of Apollos, are you not carnal? So are you not worldly? Are you not worldly minded? Or who then is Paul? And who is Apollos, but ministers through whom you believed, as the Lord gave to each one? I planted, Apollos watered, but God gave the increase." So you see here that here's Paul, and he's interesting because he's talking about himself. He's saying, hey, you're not supposed to be following me. I had my part to play. Right. Apollos had his part to play.
Right.
But the reality is the increase came from God. That God's the one, he's the focal point here. It was his message that they were delivering. And they had some growing up to do. They had some growing up to do to remove themselves from this worldly mindset of, we're going to follow after the best teacher, or we're going to follow after the best speaker, we're going to follow after the person that has the most energy, whatever that was going through their minds. No, he says, no, we're following after God. And we're thinking in a godly mindset, in a godly way. And so, as you see their maturity is being kind of put to the test there, he kind of goes on and talks about, how they can continue this growth process and how they can continue growing up. He says this in verse 7, "So then neither he who plants is anything, nor he who waters, but God who gives the increase. Now he who plants and he who waters are one, and each are one, and each one will receive his own reward according to his own labor. For we are God's fellow workers, and you are God's field. You are God's building. According to the grace of God, which was given to me as a wise master builder, I have laid the foundation, and another builds on it. But let each one take heed how he builds on it." So here he's talked about how, Apollos and Paul, they're good in their own ways. They're good men. They're good preachers. He's not denying that about himself or about Apollos. But what he's saying is that as you take what they have given you, which is the words of God, you got to grow in this.
Right.
You got to keep building upon it. You have to add upon it. And it's going to go here and focus on what we're going to get into the next part of this passage, talking about the foundation, and then about what we're building on top of that foundation. So what is the foundation, and how are we to build upon it?
Okay, well, we may have to talk about some of the rest of it later. The key point here is that in verse 11, he says, For no other foundation can anyone lay than that which is laid, which is Jesus Christ. The foundation of the church is Jesus Christ. And if you really think about it, you go back to Peter
Right.
and that great confession in Matthew chapter 16. He says, "Thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God." And Jesus says, "You're blessed, Simon, son of Jonah, because flesh and blood didn't reveal this to you."
Right.
He learned that Jesus was the Christ because of the powerful works that God enabled his Son to do. That was the way he did that. And then Jesus says, "Upon this rock will I build my church." And it's obvious reading the whole context that the rock is who Jesus really is, the Son of God. So we don't build on men for a simple reason, because the foundation is the Son of God.